Great day, great day, great day to you, beautiful people. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. I hope you all are doing well. Hopefully, you are protecting your mental, finding time for an emotional release valve, and continuing to strive to become beneficial. Uh, hey, welcome. For those who are new to the channel, my name is Jamal Calpin, and you are attending Reading with Jam. Also go by the name of Jam, and I am an actor, voice actor, and a content creator that is focused on trying to help Black men overcome gray mediocrity so that they can become their best selves for glory and for good and for the deep joy that resides inside of them. So the Reading with Jam is me practicing as an actor my narration skills, as well as reading and sharing personal development content that I was already going to read, but I'm going to share it and kind of expose it and help more people hear these things that should be helpful for us becoming better men and better people. So we've been reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, and this is part 12, and we're going to be reading chapter 10 today. So we're going to jump right in because I have a kind of a busy schedule this morning. So let's jump right in. Again, we are reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. I'm going to put 30 minutes on the clock and jump right in. So here we go. Clock started. Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Chapter 10. Places we go when the heart is open. Love, lovelessness, heartbreak, trust, self-trust, betrayal, defensiveness, flooding, hurt. Love. Everywhere we learn that love is important, and yet we are bombarded by its failure. In the realm of political, among the religious, in our families, and in our romantic lives, we see little indication that love informs decisions, strengthens our understanding of community, or keeps us together. This bleak picture in no way alters the nature of our longing. We still hope that love will prevail. We still believe in love's promise. Bell Hooks, All About Love. Distinguished emotions researcher Barbara Fredrickson describes the umbrella term love as including the preoccupying and strong desire for further connection, the powerful bonds people hold with a select few, and the intimacy that grows between them, the commitments to loyalty and faithfulness. In Fredrickson's view, love permeates everyday interactions with others, ranging from strangers and acquaintances to friends and spouses. Forming the emotional context from which to strengthen relationships. Interestingly, there is debate among researchers about whether love is an emotion. However, among everyone else, love is clearly thought of as an emotion. In a study conducted by Shaver and colleagues, undergraduates were asked to rate 213 emotion words in terms of whether they would call the word an emotion. 1 equals, I definitely would not call this an emotion, to 4, I definitely would call this an emotion. The word love received the highest average rating, 3.94, of all the words on the list, edging out the word hate, 3.90. As someone who is committed to research that reflects our lived experiences, I find that Shaver's study in Fredrickson's description both align with what my team heard. Love is an emotion that we're capable of feeling in many different contexts, from intimate partner relationships and family bonds to friends and pets. It's always a risk to define a term like love. I personally think it might be best left to the poets, artists, and yacht rock songwriters. However, a definition did emerge from our research, and it's withstood the test of new data. We cultivate love when we allow our most vulnerable and powerful selves to be deeply seen and known, and when we honor the spiritual connection that grows from that offering with trust, respect, kindness, and affection. Love is not something we give or get. It is something that we nurture and grow, a connection that can be cultivated between two people only when it exists within each one of them. We can love others only as much as we love ourselves. Shame, blame, disrespect, betrayal, and the withholding of affection damage the roots from which love grows. Sorry, bookmarking some things. Come on. All right. Whatever. So the thing about the Kindle, which I really enjoy it, and I'm grateful to have one, is just sometimes doing stuff on the screen can be not that easy. All right. Picking up. Love can survive these injuries only if they're acknowledged, healed, and rare. Hmm. I'll confess that I don't think we'll ever be able to fully unravel the mysteries of love, or to be honest, many of the other emotions we experience. At least I hope not. I think attempting to better understand ourselves and each other is essential, but so is mystery. Lovelessness. The quote that opens this section on love is from Bell Hooks' book, All About Love. Hooks is a professor, social critic, and writer whose work has shaped my life. In fact, I often say that her work is responsible for 90% of the stretch marks on my mind. As a first time university teacher, I carried her book, Teaching to Transgress, with me at all times, and I slept with it next to me on my nightstand. She teaches that the injustice and systemic oppression that we see in the world today stem from a deep collective lovelessness and calls for an ethic of love. It sounds overly simplistic, but when you read her work, you understand that a love ethic is a rigorous calling. Hooks writes, refusal to stand up for what you believe in weakens individual morality and ethics as well as those of the culture. No wonder then that we are a nation of people, the majority of whom across race, class, and gender claim to be religious, claim to believe in the divine power of love, and yet collectively remain unable to embrace a love ethic and allow it to guide behavior, especially if doing so would mean supporting radical change. Fear of radical changes leads many citizens of our nation to betray their minds and hearts. I don't want to betray my mind or heart. I want to live by a love ethic. We need more love between us, but also among us. Not rainbow and unicorn love or commercialized love. We need more real love, gritty, dangerous, wild eyed, justice seeking love. Heartbreak. I researched heartbreak when I was writing Rising Strong. I learned that heartbreak is more than just a painful type of disappointment or failure. It hurts in a different way because heartbreak is always connected to love and belonging. Joe Reynolds, a retired Episcopal priest, has taught me the most about heartbreak. I shared his essay in Rising Strong, but I want to share it here again. I truly don't think we can read it enough. Heartbreak is an altogether different thing. Disappointment doesn't grow into heartbreak, nor does failure. Heartbreak comes from the loss of love or the perceived loss of love. My heart can be broken only by someone or something, like my dog, though a part of me really believes my dog is a person, to whom I have given my heart. There may be expectations, both met and unmet, in a relationship that ends in heartbreak, but disappointment is not the cause of the heartbreak. There may be failures within the relationship. Indeed, there certainly will be, for we are imperfect vessels to hold the love of another person. But the failures didn't cause the heartbreak. Heartbreak is what happens when love is lost. Heartbreak can come from being rejected by the one you love. The pain is more intense when you thought the other person loved you, but the expectation of returned love isn't necessary for heartbreak. Unrequited love can be heartbreaking. The death of a loved one is heartbreaking. I didn't expect them to live forever, and death is nobody's fault, regardless of smoking, bad diets, no exercise, or whatever. But my heart is broken anyway. A related heartbreak is the death of something unique, maybe even essential, in someone I love. I didn't want my children to stay children all their lives, but at times the loss of innocence was heartbreaking. The loss of love doesn't have to be permanent to be heartbreaking. Moving away from a loved one can break your heart. Change in another person I love may be a good thing. It may be significant personal growth, and I may be happy about it and proud of it. It can also change our relationship and break my heart. The list goes on. There is a plethora of ways in which a heart can be broken. The common denominator is the loss of love or the perceived loss of love. To love with any level of intensity and honesty is to become vulnerable. I used to tell couples getting married that the only thing I could tell them with certainty was that they would hurt each other. To love is to know the loss of love. Heartbreak is unavoidable unless we choose not to love at all. A lot of people do just that. Every time we love, we risk heartbreak. Despite how lonely heartbreak feels, it's universal. I remember sitting next to a woman in an airport terminal, waiting for our plane to board, and she started weeping. She was probably in her early 60s and she was by herself. When I asked her if she was okay and if I could get her anything, she didn't reply. She just shook her head and looked away. I returned to reading my book until, about 20 minutes later, the woman said, "We had to put our dog down. My heart is broken." She wasn't looking at me when she said it. She was looking straight ahead. I said, "I'm sorry," and I squeezed her forearm. We ended up talking until we boarded, and when we deplaned in Houston, she gave me a hug. That happened about 15 years ago. I had never had a pet of my own at that point in my life, but having experienced heartbreak in several other contexts, I could connect with the sense of loss and longing that she was feeling. I didn't question her grief, but I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm glad I don't have a dog. I don't think a dog would be worth heartbreak. Fast forward 2 years ago, when my first dog, Daisy, a rescue Bichon, got untreatable cancer after 10 healthy, wonderful years with us. The drive home from the vet's office without her was unbearable. That night, all four of us were sobbing in a big heap on the couch. I looked at my kids, who were inconsolable, and said, "We love Daisy so much. This is heartbreak." Then I looked over at Lucy, our second Bichon, who was also missing Daisy, and thought, God, this hurts, and it's totally worth it. The broken-hearted are the bravest among us. They dared to love. Trust. In the thin book of Trust, an essential primer for building trust at work, Charles Feltman defines trust as choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. He defines distrust as a general assessment that what is important to me is not safe with this person in this situation or any situation. So I'm going to read that one more time. He defines distrust as a general assessment that what is important to me is not safe with this person in this situation or any situation. These definitions perfectly capture what emerged from our data on trust and mistrust. Trust is more of a cognitive assessment than an emotion. But, as we all know, conversations about trust can bring up a lot of emotions, especially hurt and defensiveness. It's difficult to talk about trust in our personal or professional relationships because it's such a big concept. If someone says, "I don't trust you," it feels like a general assault on our character. We've spent the past 10 years trying to figure out exactly what constitutes trust. What are the specific behaviors we're talking about when we talk about trust? 7 elements of trust emerge from our data, and we use the acronym BRAVING. Boundaries. You respect my boundaries, and when you're not clear about what's okay and not okay, you ask. You're willing to say no. Reliability. You do what you say you'll do. At work, this means staying aware of your competencies and limitations so you don't overpromise and are able to deliver on commitments and balance competing priorities. Accountability. Your own you own your mistakes, apologize, and make amends. Vault. You don't share information or experiences that are not yours to share. I need to know that my confidences are kept and that you're not sharing with me, excuse me, and that you're not sharing with me any information about other people that should be confidential. Integrity. You choose courage over comfort. You choose what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy. And you choose to practice your values rather than simply professing them. Non judgment. I can ask for what I need, and you can ask for what you need. We can talk about how we feel without judgment. We can ask each other for help without judgment. Generosity. You extend the most generous interpretation possible to the intentions, words, and actions of others. When we bring Dare to Lead training into organizations, this is one of the most adopted tools. It gives all of us a framework to get specific about what's working in our trust building and what needs our attention. I can say to someone, We're working hard on developing trust in our relationship in these areas, and I feel we need to work more on these areas. What's your experience? We most often think about trust between people and groups, but we often forget about the importance of self trust. Self trust is normally the first casualty of failure or mistakes. We stop trusting ourselves when we hurt others, get hurt, feel shame, or question our worth. I recently celebrated 25 years of sobriety, and when I was reflecting on what that's meant in my life, I couldn't stop thinking about self trust. Returning to the definition from Feltman, I realized that my sobriety has taught me that I can trust myself and my actions when it comes to protecting what I value. There are still occasions when I have to slow down and get intentional so I don't end up distrusting or betraying myself. But I know but I know increased self-trust has been a huge gift of sobriety. Here's how we use the braving tool to think about self-trust. B. Did I respect my own boundaries? Was I clear about what's okay and what's not okay? R. Was I reliable? Did I do what I said I was going to do? A. Did I hold myself accountable? V. Did I respect the vault and share appropriately? I. Did I act from my integrity? N. Did I ask for what I needed? Was I non judgmental about needing help? And G. Was I generous toward myself? Betrayal. For there to be betrayal, for there to be betrayal, there would have to have been trust first. Susan Collins, The Hunger Games. Betrayal is so painful because, at its core, it is a violation of trust. It happens in relationships in which trust is expected and assumed. So when it's violated, we're often shocked and we can struggle to believe what's happening. It can feel as if the ground beneath us has given way. Most betrayals happen among spouses, romantic partners, friends, coworkers, and occasionally family members. The most common types of betrayals include extramarital affairs or cheating on a steady dating partner, lying, betraying, uh, sorry, pick up. The most common types of betrayals include extramarital affairs or cheating on a steady dating partner, lying, betraying confidences, and rejecting or abandoning a partner. When betrayal is the result of physical or SA, um, perpetrated by a trusted partner or family member, such as is the case in DV or trying to find the right words that are accepted on YouTube, excuse me, such as in the cases of DV or little people. No, that's not even right. Um, I'll just take the worst. Or child abuse perpetrated by a parent. It excuse me, it is referred to as betrayal trauma. Oof. When we're injured by betrayal, we can suffer high levels of anxiety, depression, anger, sadness, jealousy, decreased self worth, embarrassment, humiliation, shame, and even trauma symptoms. When I read these symptoms, the first thing I thought about was the times I betrayed myself. As we just covered, self trust is important, and when we violate that, often to make someone else happy or in a bid for acceptance, I think we can feel self betrayal too. There have been times in my life when I've said something that I didn't believe or did something I didn't want to do in order to avoid feeling left out. The harshest consequence of that for me was dealing with my own betrayal. I've been thinking a lot about Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles pulling out of competitions to protect their mental and emotional well being. It's inspiring to watch these women choose to disappoint others and endure cheap seat criticism over their refusal to betray their bodies, minds, and spirits. There's another type of betrayal called institutional betrayal. Researchers explain that this type of betrayal occurs when an institution causes harm, by action or inaction, to an individual who trusts or depends upon that institution. Factors that contribute to institutional betrayal include strict membership requirements, military training, elite sports, the existence of prestige or power differentials, caregivers versus patients, clergy versus parishioners, and rigid priorities, such as extreme efforts to protect the reputation of the organization. Perhaps the most devastating organizational betrayal is a cover up. In Dare to Lead, I explain Cover ups are perpetrated not only by the original actors, but by a culture of complicity and shame. Sometimes individuals are complicit because staying quiet or hiding the truth benefits them and or doesn't jeopardize their influence or power. Other times, people are complicit because it's the norm. They work in a cover-up culture that uses shame to keep people quiet. Sorry, I'm just highlighting this part because that's deep. Okay. Either way, when the culture of a corporation, nonprofit, university, government, church, sports program, school, or family mandates that it is more important to protect the reputation of that system and those in power than it is to protect the basic human dignity of individuals or communities, you can be certain of the following problems. Shame is systemic. Complicity is part of the culture. Money and power trump ethics. Accountability is dead. Control and fear are management tools, and there's a trail of devastation and pain. It's possible to heal betrayal, but it's rare because it requires significant courage and vulnerability to hear the pain we've caused without becoming defensive. In our research, we found that the only way back from betrayal is accountability, amends, and action. None of these things are possible without acknowledging the pain and possibly trauma that we have caused someone without rationalizing or making excuses. We're also much better as individuals and as a culture at shaming and blaming than we are at actual accountability. Whew. All right. Defensiveness. At its core, defensiveness is a way to protect our ego and a fragile self-esteem. Our research team member, Ellen Alley, explains that our self esteem is considered fragile when our failures, mistakes, and imperfections decrease our self worth. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. In our work, the opposite of a fragile self esteem is grounded confidence. With grounded confidence, we accept our imperfections and they don't diminish our self worth. It makes sense that defensiveness occurs in areas of our lives where we have fragile self esteem, or across several areas of our lives if the fragility is more general. Any perceived call out of our weakness is experienced as an attack on our worth, so we fight hard to defend ourselves against it. Dang. In order to try to limit our exposure to information that differs from how we think of ourselves, we get defensive and over justify, make excuses, minimize, blame, discredit, discount, refute, and reinterpret. Defensiveness blocks us from hearing feedback and evaluating if we want to make meaningful changes in our thinking or behavior based on input from others. In our Dare to Lead training, we work with participants to figure out what defensiveness looks like for them, what it feels like, and whether there are some situations that are more likely to trigger it than others. To increase self awareness, we ask folks to think back to a time when they received difficult feedback and try to remember what their bodies were doing, what thoughts were coming up, and what emotions they were feeling. The vast majority of people struggle to remember the exact thoughts and feelings, which makes sense, given that many of us go into fight or flight mode in these situations. However, for the most part, people can remember their physical responses, folding their arms over their chest, shoving their hands into their pockets, getting tunnel vision, feeling their heart race, looking down, and getting dry mouth are just a few. It's worth thinking about the physical cues. It's worth thinking about the physical cues that show up for you when experiencing defensiveness and devising a strategy that can help pull you back into the present moment. When I get defensive, I often get tunnel vision and start planning what I'm going to say instead of listening. But I have found some ways to disarm my defensiveness. My strategy is to subtly open my palms, even if my hands are just hanging by my side or on my lap, and actually say, I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I really want to understand. It's pretty effective. If I'm having a really hard time, I might say, I'm sorry, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm going to get a glass of water. Can we sit down in 10 minutes and start again? Flooding. Excuse me, flooding. This seems like the perfect place to talk about the concept of flooding. The body can become overwhelmed when it senses danger. And for a lot of us, a difficult conversation, hard feedback, or an argument is enough to send our body into overdrive. We can feel overwhelmed, attacked, and confused. According to the Gottman Institute, flooding is a sensation of feeling psychologically and physically overwhelmed during conflict, making it virtually impossible to have a productive problem solving discussion. In his book, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail and How You Can Make Yours Last, John Gottman explains we each have we each have a sort of built-in meter that measures how much negativity accumulates during such interactions. When the level gets too high for you, the needle starts going haywire and flooding begins. Just how readily people become flooded is individual. He also shares that flooding is affected by how much stress you have going on in your life. The more pressure we're under, the more likely we are to be easily flooded. One of the worst patterns that I brought to my marriage from my family was get back in here and fight with me. Growing up, we didn't take breaks during fights. No one ever said, this is no longer productive and we should take a timeout before someone gets their feelings hurt. Our strategy was get louder and meaner until you win or someone else is crying. When I first married Steve, in the middle of a heated argument, he would say, let's stop and take a break. I was like, what are you talking about? At some point, I realized that stopping scared me. Fighting together seemed less painful than hurting alone. Looking back, I just didn't know how to do it. I had never been taught or seen it modeled. Gottman's work helped me understand the mechanics behind, okay, can we circle back in 20 minutes? Or, okay, how much time do you need? Knowing that we're coming back to finish the discussion and when reassures me in some way. This research also helped me realize that it wasn't just Steve who was getting overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed too. The difference is our strategies. He shuts down, I lash out. Disastrous. Now, when I feel flooded, I'm as likely to say, time out, as he is. This is a good thing because, according to Gottman, chronic flooding sets us up to dread communicating. Gottman discusses this effect in the context of marriages and partnerships, but I've seen the same thing in organizations. I've interviewed many research participants who experience chronic flooding with their bosses, so much so that every time they're called into the office, they're already on path to overwhelm. There's only so much our bodies and nervous systems can stand before they flip the survival switch and stop communicating and start protecting or attacking. Sorry. Looking back, I've never once regretted calling a timeout at home or work. Not once. I've never experienced a little time and space being a bad thing, but I have plenty of regrets the other way around. Hurt. I'm not sure there's a braver sentence in the human catalog of brave sentences than my feelings are hurt. It's simple, vulnerable, and honest, but we don't say it very often. We get pissed off, or we hurt back, or we internalize the hurt until we believe we deserve it and that something is wrong with us. But rarely do we say, this really hurt my feelings. The definition of hurt from a team of researchers led by Anita Evangelisti, sorry, again, I apologize for the names, goes a long way in explaining why acknowledging hurt is so difficult. They write, individuals who are hurt experience a combination of sadness at having been emotionally wounded and fear of being vulnerable to harm. When people feel hurt, they have appraised something that someone said or did as causing them emotional pain. We all know that it's really scary to put our heart on the line and say, I feel wounded and sad about what happened yesterday, and I'm afraid to get hurt again. It's deeply vulnerable, but it's also universal. All of us have felt this way, often, and a lot. It's impossible to be in relationships and avoid ever feeling hurt. Just as it's impossible to know love without knowing what it feels like to have a broken heart. Evangelisti and team explain that hurt happens through social interaction. In fact, hurt feelings are most often caused by people with whom we have close relationships, when we feel devalued or rejected by the other person. Most behaviors that result in hurt feelings are not intended to be hurtful. They typically involve actions that are thoughtless, careless, or insensitive. However, the more intentional an action is perceived as, the more hurtful it feels. Our hurt feelings are typically experienced simultaneously with other emotions, such as sadness, anger, anxiety, jealousy, or loneliness. As a result, they don't always feel the same as most other emotions do. However, research indicates that even though hurt feelings are a mix of several emotions, they are a distinct emotional experience, not just a combination of other negative emotions. As I was explaining this to my teenage son, all I could come up with is the rainbow snow cone analogy. There's grape, cherry, lime, lemon, orange, and blueberry. But you don't really taste all of those when you eat it. It just tastes like a rainbow snow cone. Our reactions to hurt feelings can be self-blaming, or we might cry, lash out, or retaliate by trying to hurt the other person, and or seek out other relationships to find comfort. When reparation doesn't seem possible, hurt feelings can turn into anger or sadness. One thing that motivates me to be a little braver in how I handle my hurt feelings is research that shows that when we respond to hurt feelings with anger, the other person tends to match our anger with more anger. I can tell you this has happened in my kitchen about 1,365 times. However, when repair seems possible and we share our hurt feelings and try to reconnect without the anger, the other person tends to respond with constructive actions, including apologies and amends. I've tried, I'm so pissed off right now because you're a jerk, but I'm going to say that my feelings are hurt, so you apologize right this second. It's clearly not what they had in mind. One last note about hurt feelings. Researchers Mark Leary and Carrie Springer have interesting thoughts on the language of hurt feelings. Unlike most other emotions, the expression hurt feelings lacks obvious synonyms. The words wounded and pained have similar connotations, but these words are typically not used to describe emotional experience. Also, although many emotions such as sadness or grief can be described as distressing or painful, hurt feelings seems to have a more specific connotation than general emotional pain. An example might be grief. If I'm grieving over the loss of someone close to me, I might tell you I'm really hurting, but I probably wouldn't say her death hurt my feelings. It's a great reminder of the power of language. When we're expressing emotion, it's important to differentiate experiencing hurt from having hurt feelings. All right. So that concludes chapter 10 of Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. We just finished reading Places We Go When the Heart is Open. Um, I think a big thing that I'm noticing in this book, discussing the various places of our heart, the various places of our human experience, is how important vulnerability is, as well as self-awareness. So whether you're dealing with love, lovelessness, heartbreak, hurt, betrayal, trust, all those things, it requires vulnerability, and it requires some level of awareness of yourself. So being able to trust somebody, knowing, okay, something in me is willing to accept what somebody is giving me. I can trust them. And knowing that it's very possible that while you're being vulnerable with that and while you're trying to trust somebody, you could get hurt. That's I think, a level of self awareness that you have to know. It's like, okay, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in like a business partnership, whatever it is, you're saying that I'm going to take this chance. I'm going to take this chance with somebody. And I also think it's important that you have to have that level of self awareness if you have been the one that has broken trust, if you have been the one that has betrayed others. And a lot of the things that was shared in this chapter really hit for me because I've had to wrestle with, like, for example, the defensiveness thing. I've had to wrestle with that and do the work to not be so defensive, especially when I have wronged others and wronged those I care deeply about. But again, that takes a level of vulnerability and a level of self awareness to be like, okay, I really did mess up. I really did cause you harm. I really did break your trust. I really did betray you. And being able to look at that and be vulnerable enough to admit that, yeah, I messed up. That's hard. That's hard. But it's not like it's harder than the person having to admit that they've been hurt as well. Because again, for some people, like she said, there are different ways that people respond to hurt. People respond to like broken trust and things like that. For some people, it's easier to just close off, close off their heart, close off their emotions. So yeah, they were like, "Well, I don't trust you, but I'm not going to communicate that to you. You've hurt me, but I'm not going to communicate that to you because it doesn't feel safe and it doesn't feel worth it, and I don't feel like being vulnerable to you because you already hurt me." You know, and so like in the midst of all of this, places, when your heart is open, it requires you to be vulnerable. It requires you to have levels of self awareness so that you can do the work, so that you can show up for other people, and so that you can show up well for yourself. And it's definitely something, a space that I'm working through because I want to get better at loving. I want to get better at showing up for those who I care about, and loving them and being honest, and also showing up better for myself. Because I think what she talked about in regards to self trust and self betrayal and things like that, I know I've done that. I know I've broken my own trust, and I know I've betrayed myself. And again, that takes time of meditation and reflecting to really admit it, because I don't know. There's a lot of good stuff there, but I don't really have the time this morning to really get into it. But thank you all for joining me. Again, we were reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. We covered chapter 10 today. Yeah, this was a good chapter. I don't know, maybe I'll make a separate video or something related to that. I don't know. I have to think about it. But thank you all for joining me for another reading with Jam. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay safe out there. Protect your mental. Find time for an emotional release valve and keep striving to become beneficial. I believe in you. I believe in you. You can do great things. Like Les Brown says, you have greatness within you. So y'all be safe. Enjoy your day. And I'll talk to you all tomorrow for more reading of Alice of the Heart by Brene Brown. Peace.